Welcome, and thanks for taking the time to be with us tonight and to add your input to that which we've already collected since we started this work about 3 years ago. I wanted to introduce the board members that are here tonight. We have Mary Claire Edmonds, Megan Doyle, Jen Brown, and Adam Scobie in the back, Tom Kova, who you saw, and Nicole Flowers. Okay, a few mics straggling out, and Hannah Tedros. There you go. Just for some background, just to get everybody on the same page. During our budget cycle in early 2023, the Board of Ed was asked by city leaders to begin a long-range facility study. And since then, the board has engaged in data collection, review, and conversations to determine what is the best configuration for Milford Public Schools. So we know that demographics and needs have changed over time. K-5 enrollment today is about 1,200 fewer students than 20 years ago, although we are down one school since then, and that doesn't reflect increased pre-K needs or special ed needs. We hear a lot about apartments, and we know that the 1- and 2-bedroom apartments that have gone up and continue to go up around town are not expected to bring a large number of kids to the district, so our enrollment has been relatively flat. And we've heard this from multiple city planners. We know that our needs for teaching and learning of all students is different today than it was when our schools were built 50 to 75 years ago. So some of the things that we have looked at, we've looked at enrollment projections, we've looked at building capacity, information, and programming needs, how teaching and learning has changed since our schools were first built, and how that has affected the use of our buildings. We looked at a study that identified the actual condition of our aging buildings and the amount of work that they need. And we've had over 1,400 interactions through surveys, focus groups, community conversations, and board workshops, where we've learned that the community seems ready to move away from the status quo, understanding that our buildings are old and it might be time to begin replacing them. We've learned that people are okay with change and consolidation if it's done with planning and intention. And we've heard that parents want more opportunities for their children and parity among schools. So last June, based on all of the information just mentioned, the board adopted a preferred configuration of 1 high school if land could be identified, 2 or 3 middle schools, and 6 elementary schools. We then enlisted the help of a consultant, Perkins Eastman, who are here tonight, and they'll introduce themselves in a minute, to make informed recommendations for a final long-range facilities master plan. Earlier this year, they shared their findings that there is no viable land to accommodate 1 comprehensive high school, so the final plan will envision renovation of the 2 current facilities. Earlier this month, after hearing the consultant's report on middle schools, the board made the decision to consolidate into 2 middle schools, east and west. And tonight, we are focusing specifically on the consultant's recommendations for 6 elementary schools. And they will share that information with us all in a few minutes. I do want to say that we know that these are delicate conversations, but they're conversations that we have to have. We've stated our commitment to maintaining our current class size guidelines, to being thoughtful in our planning, and to provide support to our students, families, and staff as things unfold. So just to keep in mind some next dates, on April 13th, all of the information that we've gathered over the past several months will be brought together into a draft master plan for the board's discussion and consideration, including recommendations for sequencing steps, so when things might happen. Actual implementation of each part of the plan will be further discussed and decided upon as those times arise, so that's down the road. But we expect that some of the thinking that you develop and share tonight will help inform those later steps. On April 20th, we'll have another interactive workshop like this on the full plan, and we hope to make our final decision on a master plan on April 27th. So we are nearing the end of this very lengthy process. Our school facilities are a community asset, and we do hope that you recognize the care that we're taking with this review. We're trying hard really to look at the data. We're trying hard to be, look at the big picture. And we want to emphasize that the master plan will be designed for the long term. So this is a 20-year plan. It will take years to implement. Nothing is expected to happen immediately, but we hope that you find tonight's discussion and the information that we shared informative and useful. So I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Tayed for a minute to share some additional thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. I echo the thoughts of our board chair and want to start by saying that we are working with this community to inform this plan. And we know, particularly at the elementary level, great sensitivity needs to occur, particularly considering the history of Milford and the different configurations that have existed in the past. Our focus is to ensure the greatest level of stability for our young people, so that if and when we get to a point that we have to move students from one school to another, we do it with as little disruption as possible, and we only do it once. It would be my desire as a school leader that we're not going to shuffle kids 1 year and then 2 years later we're going to shuffle them again. So I believe that this board is committed to ensuring the least amount of disruption for young people. I also want to echo Ms. Glennon's words in that we know there's a lot of very emotional identity related to your neighborhood school. We recognize that. And anytime we talk about closing a school, it just goes against everything we're made of when we consider the relationships-based way that we approach local public schools. With that said, I want to underscore that our buildings were built, the oldest building in the elementary fleet is 1950, and the youngest building is 1967. So we're looking at buildings that are like 75 plus years old. And I don't know what education was like in 1950, but it certainly is different than it is today. Today, we are making the best we can with the facilities that we have. Not only do on the operations side, we pray that there isn't a boiler that gives any day, even though they're very well taken care of. It is very possible that there will be a major maintenance issue that hits us unexpectedly. But on the other side of it, even this beautiful new gymnasium, in our elementary schools, we do not have a dedicated gym space, separate from where kids eat and separate where kids perform. We also don't have dedicated instrument instruction spaces. We also don't have dedicated spaces for mental health services, even some of our specialized instruction. In some cases, we have speech language occurring in the same space as reading support as OTP, occupational physical therapy. That is not appropriate for our young people. So at one time in 1950, 1967, these buildings fit the need of our learning community. Today in 2026, programmatically, they don't fit the needs of our learning community any longer. So this vision not only is a vision of getting quote-unquote newer buildings because of operations and facilities, but we need up-to-date buildings where our kids are learning in more appropriate spaces. We want that for our young people. The hard part is making the decisions of closing schools, renovating schools, building new schools, and understanding the financial costs related to that. But we have to create the plan at some time. And as Ms. Glennon said, it's going to be for the long term. And I want to say again and again and again, we are committed to class size guidelines. In fact, kudos to this current Board of Education. In their budget, they voted to reduce the class size in kindergarten. So not only are they showing that they're committed to the current class sizes, they also want to be responsive to understanding what the learning needs are today and lowering those class sizes. So please keep that in mind as the consultants share with you the ideas around the consolidation and going to newer facilities in spaces that are more appropriate for learning today. With that said, I'm going to turn things over to Perkins Eastman. The flow of the evening is going to include a small presentation to update everybody, because we don't want to assume that you read everything online. So we're going to update you with some information from the consultants. And then Board of Education members will divide themselves up among the stations that you see. There are 3 of them. And we ask them, we'll have you meander about to all the stations and leave written feedback, which we will collate and put into a document for the Board of Education and for the public. And then also to engage with Board of Ed members and ask questions and give them feedback. And then we'll come back at the end of the evening where Board of Education members will give some highlights of what they heard from the community this evening. So that's the flow of the evening. Okay? And I'll turn things over to Perkins Eastman. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So we went over the agenda. We're going to try to be pretty brief here. Don't get too concerned if I'm going fast, but please stop me if you have any questions. But we do want to spend time getting feedback and everyone visiting the stations around the room. So we're Perkins Eastman. We're an architecture and planning firm. We're actually a national firm, but everybody here on our team is located here in Stamford, in Connecticut. Our So just a little background about where we are. So we have been looking through all the schools in the district. So we started out looking at the high schools, looking at potential for the high schools to be consolidated into one site, so one high school. We didn't find a site that worked really well for that, so we moved on to, looking at ways that those high schools, that your existing schools could be renovated, added to, et cetera, to accommodate the program. We then looked at middle schools, which we were asked to look at the potential of 3 versus 2 middle schools, and that's something that we're continuing to look at. And then tonight we're looking at the elementary schools. And with the elementary schools, as Dr. Kataya explained, we were asked to look at reducing from 8 to 6. So it wasn't so much that we were asked, should we reduce, but how would we reduce from 8 to 6? So I'll look a little bit about the existing schools. So I'm sorry that this slide is off the top of the page. Right? But it's your community, so you know where your elementary schools are. So there's 8 elementary schools throughout the district. And so one of the things we looked at, and as Dr. Kataya laid out, there's not necessarily equality across the different schools. Obviously here, we're Pumpkin Delight, where there's been a nice new gym added to the school. Not all the schools have the same facilities, so that's one of the things we were looking at. And as we go through, sorry it's cut off, but sorry, we're just going to take a minute because there's a lot of information. I think go back up. Yeah. Okay. And the first one, can you go back? Okay, yeah, we'll go to Cap 10. Thank you. So the 2 buildings that we looked at, likely candidates for closing, are Cap 10 and Meadowside. I'll go through all the buildings relatively quickly. So as we said, they range from 1950 to 1967, I think, for the different ages of the building. So all pretty old. Not that they haven't been maintained, not that there hasn't been work done on them all these years, but as we look at these buildings, at some point we get to kind of the end of the useful life of the buildings, particularly when we're looking at schools and trying to design schools that really fit the curriculum today. So Cap 10, and you'll notice, I don't need to get into all of it, but there's something called an FCI, the Facility Condition Index. So that's something that facility folks look at in terms of a kind of holistic way of valuing where the building's at. So when we get to something that's above 40%, so above 40% is where you start to think about whether it's really worth it to continue investing in a building rather than replacing a building. And you'll see all of the buildings reach, within 5 or 10 years, reach above that 40%. So I'll go through each one at JFK Elementary School, built in 1967. Again, it's above that 40 mark when we look out to the 5 or 10 year. The other thing you'll notice that more or less I'll call the enrollment flat. So we don't see a lot of growth. I know there's been some questions about that with a lot of development in Milford, but it doesn't really pan out to be necessarily a lot of more school-age children. Thank you. And I'll go through relatively quick because the story gets very repetitive. As you can see, the buildings are older. The facility condition index is above 40. Enrollment is more or less flat. Same for Matheson Elementary School, Middleside, and Orange Avenue Elementary School, Orchard Hills, and Pumpkin Lake. So, similar, we're looking at the enrollment. They have different enrollment sizes, but all of them are getting close to the end of their useful life, and all of them have more or less consistent enrollment. So Lauren's going to take a look a little bit about elementary schools in terms of when we talk about what a current elementary school would look like, what kind of programs we want to support, which are very different than what we thought school, when schools were built in the 60s, what the curriculum was and what it is today.
Mark? So 21st century school and a classroom should look something like this. Plenty of daylighting, modern furniture, LED lights, sustainable flooring, and flexible furniture, right? So we want to give the teachers the opportunity to move around the classroom. You're not just at the teaching wall all the time. You can be on all four walls and engaging with the students as well. More examples of this, daylight is like the most important aspect, or one of the most important aspects, and this is another example of flexible furniture. The students can move around throughout the day, and each teacher can really customize their own space. Music classrooms. If you purpose-build a music classroom, we study the acoustics. They should have high ceilings, special shaped space, acoustic wall panels, and ceiling height is something that if you're repurposing an old classroom for a music room, that the height is already there. So when you build them from scratch, you can get the optimal acoustics. And then you also have opportunities for growth for specialty classrooms, specialty programs. This is a small student kitchen, and you would have opportunities to grow the program in other ways. And learning doesn't just occur in the classroom in a 21st century building. The corridors can be learning opportunities. Teachers can meet with students in different, in one-on-one settings or in different, in smaller groups. And we like to look for opportunities like this to carve out little niches, not only for interest, but for student learning as well. And as I said, they could be different groups, soft seating, desks, actual teaching walls. Students, our teachers can come out of the classroom and teach out here as well. And this is an example of a maker space. There's cord reels over the ceiling, and students can have, learn in a project-based environment. And the media center as well needs to be a flexible space. There's still a lot of books that that are important. We still read physical books, and we look for opportunities to store those in the media center, and while still giving opportunity for carving out special niches for students to learn. There's work tables, soft seating, different examples. And again, plenty of natural light. Cafeteria. Acoustics is very important in a cafeteria. The room can get very loud, so we want to pay special attention to the ceiling height, the acoustics on the ceiling, and plenty of natural light in there, and furniture that could be folded up on wheels like this and moved out of the room if any other activities need to occur. This is an example of a gymatorium, but we can look for opportunities to either combine spaces, or if there's opportunity to have separate cafeteria and gym, we would look to do so. But in a modern gym, just like this, there's plenty of natural lights, high ceiling, acoustic panels, wall pads, and opportunities for side ports and roll down curtains so the teachers can teach in two spaces at once. And outside space is also very important. We want to make sure that there's age-appropriate play settings for the students, for the different grade levels, and lots of opportunities outside to learn and grow.
Thank you, Mia, for keeping us level on the screen. Apologize for the technical difficulties. So we're going to walk you through the two studies I think most of you are aware of. I'm going to be kind of brief, hopefully don't rush through it, but we want to give you enough time to walk around the room and ask enough questions to really dig into this. So what was described and explained at the beginning was the task was to go from 8 to 6. So what we looked at is moving to 6 schools, and what these studies did is we took the capacity of all the students and equally divided them into 6 different schools. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be the path for this study, but this is what we did so we can compare apples to apples. We took a look at all the factors considered: property size, building conditions, all the things that facilities conditions index, wetlands, and most importantly is geography, where they are in relationship to each other, right? East, central, and west. So as Mark mentioned, and as we said, based on geography, on the western side of town, we have Pumpkin Delight, which we're standing in now, Meadowside, and JFK. And as we see as we move forward, it makes more sense for Meadowside to be the one that closes on this part of town, on the west side. In the central part of town, you have Matheson and Orange Avenue. Those are the only two in the central. No need to close either of those schools. And then the east side, you have Calf Pen, Orchard Hills, and Live Oaks. And Calf Pen has site challenge and conditions challenge. So the recommendation currently is to close Calf Pen. So east side, you have Orchard Hills and Live Oaks, either two elementary schools serving that population. Just as I mentioned, so on the west side, we have Meadowside, which would be recommended to close. It is a small site. Challenges of adding on to the school, renovations or additions to the school would be a challenge. And we can dig in more as we move into our separate groups. And then Calf Pen on the east side, it is actually a beautiful site. Well, I'm a Milford resident myself. It is a nice site, but there's some challenges with wetlands, FEMA floodplain, etc. So this is intentionally small, so you can't read it. This is a preliminary space program, and this is something that we'll dig into the next phase of this project, is taking a look at each school and all schools together, creating that parity from school to school, making sure that the program spaces at each school are compatible with each other, taking a look at special ed programs, the spaces like Lauren and Mark just mentioned, either a dedicated gym, a dedicated cafeteria, or a combination of such. So this is what we did. We did a preliminary space program to right-size the studies that we did. So the first study one would be to, in both studies, still suggesting closing those 2 schools. The first study would be keeping the existing schools, renovating with selective demo and additions to each school. So basically working with what you have, maybe taking down a portion of the inefficient part of the building and then building it back, renovating the entire building so it's like new construction. Like new construction means we're addressing all the mechanicals, accessibility, lighting, all space requirements. Basically, it gives the school another 20-year life on top of that. But some of the challenges, as you see, is you're working around an operating school, so the disruption to students, if the students do remain in the school, that's the biggest challenge, right? It's the disruption to everyday activity and education at the school, and potentially lengthens the duration of the construction project. In the study 2, same scenario, 2 schools closed, but instead of additions and renovations, it would be new schools on those sites. So the first study, we'll dig in a little bit. So as I mentioned, you're modernizing all the schools. When you walk into schools at the end of the day, they might look as nice as this. A beautiful school can function and serve the community great. But inevitably, there are going to be some compromises because you are working around some existing infrastructure. If your classroom is, 100 square feet shorter than the target, it doesn't make sense, right, to knock that wall down and move it, a X number of feet forward. So there's some compromises. So it's not purpose-built, not a custom-built school. And as I mentioned, construction, disruption to educational activities is really the main challenge of additions or renovations. I'm not going to get to this here. We can look closer as we go. We're west here, east, and then central districts around the room that we can break into. But we did take that space program that I mentioned, the list of all spaces, and took a look at how can these be accommodated at a really high level at the site. Each of these would require a much more in-depth, significant study and multiple options on each site. But just for the feasibility of this study and where we are in the phase, we took a look at each of these options. Some require a slight modest demolition of portions of the building to accommodate more efficient Study 2 is all new build. So with a new build, it's purpose built. Like design your house almost. You get the exact list of spaces. You can design exactly to that square footage, so the buildings become much more efficient. We get the design in 21st century technology, flexibility, security, all the stuff that's built, that's cooked into school design that we can start from scratch. We get to do that from day one without any compromise. Buildings become more efficient, so potentially smaller, so the mechanical systems are sized appropriately. The exterior walls, the technology from 1950 to now is significantly different, right? So how these walls are constructed, how the envelope of the buildings perform, all that has an impact on the bottom line, the operational costs from year to year on these buildings and have a longer life as well. And I think I mentioned the footprint of the building, having designed safer sites, bus circulation, car circulation, play areas and sites, those can all be addressed with new builds as well. So we did a study as well for new schools on the sites. We did identify Kennedy and Live Oaks as potential sites that can accommodate a new build on the site at the same time that the school is operational. Obviously, this would take more study, but this has a positive effect down the road for future projects. These become enabling projects. We have new schools. These come down. You could potentially close the other two schools and use those as swing space as you renovate the other schools or create new schools. The redistricting of all these schools, that comes down the line, as was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And we don't have those answers tonight. I think it's a more nuanced discussion of where the students go and when this happens, as well as the sequencing of these projects. I think the team is currently working on, the city is also currently working on the sequencing of these projects, the priority of these projects, and that will be coming out in the near future. So there also is, there's a dollar associated. So at the bottom of this page, in each of these, that you might see, I think are listed over on the side here. We took a high-level pass, the square foot cost, the renovation, an average renovation cost of the project of school this vintage. Also demolition, remediation of any of the existing schools, taking into account site improvements as well. So for study 1, all the projects at the end of the day, this is your ballpark number, versus a new construction number, all new construction. It's not insignificant, it is a higher cost at this level, but gives you a comparison of the two. So Mark, you want to introduce the engagement?
Thanks. So pretty clear, as Mike said, we have, I can't read it, west schools over here, east schools over here, and then the central schools are over there. Each one of us will take one of those things. I think some board members also are going to join us. So happy to have everyone go around. There's Post-its, there's a few prompting questions, but please feel free to add anything. As you said, this way we'll be able to collect all the information and gather all the responses we get.
And leave your written feedback. Sorry. Then select that and type it up and document, archive it.
The same one for all, everyone.
relocation, which does include closing of Meadow side. So there are a lot of concerns regarding the distance of where students are, because there are thoroughfares and how that will affect the neighborhood schools. Questions about security, that when, regardless of the school, will be taking into consideration the parking, the flow of traffic, where the bus patterns are, and really considering that once we make that kind of decision, if we're going to go forward on any of these plans. There are also concerns regarding loss of talent, ensuring class sizes, and I didn't hear that much about what people like, so I'm going to look over here. Like the idea of art, instrumental, and other fun spaces. I think one of these two other parts is really the concern regarding the effect on children when and if redistricting needs to occur, and that it's done thoughtfully and without, with planning in mind, and so that we don't do it multiple times over a course of a period, and really factoring that into it. Those were the concerns that we heard from there. I think that's it. I'll pass it on.
Over to East Region.
Hi, good evening. I'll just go through what some of the major threads were that we talked about over here. There was a lot of concern about, I think, many different comments on not knowing the entire master plan as to what school was going to close when, and there was a lot of concerns about that. And so I think that'll have to be referred to when we actually get the master plan and we can start reviewing it. Some common threads on how is parking going to be addressed, how is transportation going to be rerouted with redistricting, when would redistricting begun. A lot of questions on the master plan with respect to order of events, as to would we do elementary schools first, would we do the high schools first. A lot of different comments on that, and I think that we'll have to look at Perkins Eastman's draft, and that'll be the next round of public discussions, I believe. There was a question on whether do we have to do all new buildings, or can we do some combination of renovations and new? Would the change in building structure impact the teaching staff, and how would we do that, and how would we update programming? And yeah, okay. What is the impact of new construction on what sort of new program offerings or better program offerings would be there to show things as a positive? There were also questions on repurposing of properties, which is really not a Board of Ed thing, but I think the public just is interested in knowing how that would happen. And I think that's kind of like the general thread. There's a ton of other ones there, but most of them were variations on that. So, thanks.
All right, Central Region. We had a lot of really thoughtful questions, so thank you to everyone who visited our station. The station is about Mathewson and Orange Ave. And there was excitement about the idea of new construction. For the price, you might as well build new, especially if you get 50 plus years. Safer car access for drop-off and pickup. Some of the main concerns of this station were that we don't have a lot of detailed information here, so there was some feelings that it's hard to say one way or another what your feedback is if you don't know all the details. There were a lot of questions about cost and impact of swing spaces in particular. And so cost of trailers, and how does that factor in? Would students be separated from siblings if they're swinging somewhere else? What would that look like? Which I think is all really valid. And the Some of the other questions were about differences in energy efficiencies or sustainability between the decisions. Busing, will more students need buses with 2 fewer schools? I think Mr. Brennan answered that question in one of our meetings, that we would not necessarily need more busing. But that was the main gist of what we had. Did I miss anything? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. What we're going to do next is take all your written feedback and archive it in a document, make that available for Board of Education and the public. We do have a facilities planning website that has everything that this board and previous boards have done for the last 3 years. Next steps, on April 13th, at the Parsons Building, Perkins will be back, and they will be sharing a draft master plan with the Board of Education members. And so some more answers will come forward. On April 20th, there will be a public engagement just like this on the full plan. Tentative location is law. We will confirm that in an email and information going out. April 20th at 7 p.m., tentatively at law, we'll have interactive public engagement like this on the full master plan. And then there will be April 27th, more opportunity for public input and a likelihood of the board master plan at that time. Okay? We will continue to put out information. We try to hit as many email distribution lists that we have. We send it over to the mayor's office for posting on their social media. We try to get into all of the groups that we can get into on social media that will post the information as well. We try to send particularly information related to elementary schools to all of our local preschools. If there is a way that we are not thinking to communicate, please come and share with me. Happy to be able to get this out in any way we can. So not just pushing out information, but also receiving information, whether it's an email to Board of Education members or to me. Please, please, please encourage. You know, many of you said, well, my neighbor doesn't know about this, or our school community doesn't know about this. We are open to learning better on how we can communicate more and more frequently and to more people. Thank you for your engagement tonight, and our board members will be available to you as we close out tonight, and hope to see you on the 13th. Have a good night. Yep.
Will aldermen or city officials be available on any of these meetings to answer questions about repurposing the building that you guys can't answer?
They're always invited to attend our meetings.
They will not be because every single one of those dates the aldermen have a budget hearing, so.
But you are welcome to
Please reach
email
out to
them,
your
right?
alderman.
Yes, please.
I do not know the answer.
There's an older person here.
Yes.
Oh, yes, and another older person. So Tony Lombardi and Megan Brennan.
What are we going to do with repurposed buildings?
We cannot, so, but we can take notes. And maybe we can get it to Dr. Kataya, or at least have the mayor, whoever should be weighing in on this, because I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, who does make it?
So that's an important point.
But we'll figure it out.
The building, sir, just so, thank you, Ms. Doyle. So the buildings are technically the Board of Ed, up until the point the Board of Ed decides to turn them over to the city. So that there has to be that action, that the Board of Ed turns it over to the city. Can you hold on to it? If there's a good purpose for that. Yeah, you're not just going to keep the building, right? And I do think that, respectfully, we have to work with our town bodies. Right? This should be like a city view of what do we want from Milford. So doing this with Board of Aldermen, with our mayor, is the most ideal process. Right? I know that there are concerns around what will go in those spaces, but I hope that won't prevent us from taking the appropriate steps to get what's best for our kiddos. But yeah, that I think is definitely a conversation to have with mayor and Board of Aldermen. Sorry, it's getting late. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night.